The day I got COVID, my boyfriend ditched me for my best friend and maxed out my credit card while I lay in bed burning up. So after they changed my locks, I called his mom and sent her a file named Your Son, the liar who left me to die. I was standing in the hallway of my own apartment building in Henderson, Nevada, sweating through a fever that made the wallpaper look like it was bending, when the locksmith told me, almost gently, that the apartment was no longer under my name. That was the moment everything stopped feeling real. My key didn't fit. My phone was at 12%. My throat felt like sandpaper. And all I could hear was the echo of my boyfriend Mark's voice from 3 days earlier when he stood on my doorstep, mask half on, holding a grocery bag like it was radioactive. I didn't sign up to be a nurse, he'd said. Don't guilt-trip me. Then he set the bag down, backed away like I was a wild animal, and got into the car. I watched him drive off with Mia, my best friend since freshman year at UNLV, laughing in the passenger seat, her stupid glittery sunglasses catching the sun as they peeled out toward the freeway on-ramp. I remember thinking, no, I must be hallucinating. No way. But then she posted a selfie before they even hit the state line. Her caption, Vegas weekend with the only man who actually treats me right. And the next story was a boomerang of her kissing his cheek, typing, Delulu is a disease lol over it. I lay in bed for 2 days shivering so hard my teeth ached. Meanwhile, Mark's name kept popping up on my credit card alerts. Hotel charges, bottle service, a helicopter tour, a Gucci belt. I tried calling him once, but he rejected the call and texted, Stop, you're being dramatic. Nobody's buying the sick act this time. By the third morning, when I could finally stand up without seeing black spots, I checked the security cam in the apartment hallway. I saw Mia carrying out my plants. My plants, the ones I'd raised from cuttings. She walked past the camera smiling like she owned the place. So when I felt strong enough to walk, I Ubered home thinking maybe, there'd be some explanation. Fever brain, maybe, some insane misunderstanding. But then I got there and saw the new lock. Saw the little scratch marks around the knob where they'd changed it in a hurry. Saw the camera tilt slightly like someone had shoved it. And that's when the locksmith told me the lease had been updated the day before. Mark had removed me, added himself and Mia. I don't remember sitting down, but suddenly I was on the hallway floor, my back against the wall, my lungs rattling. I was so dizzy I kept blinking to stay conscious. I felt like a sick stray dog outside its own home. I called the police, and when the officer arrived, he looked uncomfortable, like he didn't know where to put his eyes. Ma'am, this is technically a civil matter, he said, but he at least knocked and confirmed they were inside. He told them to open the door. They didn't. So then I called the only person left who might care, Mark's mom, Denise. She picked up on the second ring. When I told her everything, my fever, the Vegas trip, the credit card charges, the locks, she didn't even try to hold back. She sobbed. I could hear her knocking things over in her kitchen. My God, she said, my God, what has he done? And while she cried like her soul was cracking, I pressed send on the email I'd prepared the night before. The one with the file attached. The one named. The file I sent Denise was still sitting unread in her inbox, while I sat on the curb outside my own apartment building in Henderson, pressing a cold water bottle to my forehead and trying not to throw up. Waiting for her to open it. Waiting for something in my life to stop spinning. But before all this, before the fever, the locks, the humiliation, I used to think Mark and I were solid. Not perfect, but solid the way couples get after a few years together. We met at a bar off Fremont Street during one of those nights where Vegas locals pretend they're tourists just to shake the dust off. He spilled beer on me. I laughed. He bought me a replacement. We ended up walking the strip until sunrise, joking about how all the glitter on the ground looked like crushed dreams. He wasn't the smartest guy I ever dated, or the most ambitious, but he made me feel safe. Supported, and after a breakup that left me with panic attacks, safe sounded like heaven. I moved into his apartment after a year. 6 months later, we got a bigger one together, the place I was now locked out of. And then there was Mia. I met her at UNLV in a women's psych class. She sat next to me because she liked my hair, which was such a random, sweet thing to say that I instantly attached to her. She was the kind of friend who could talk her way into any party, get free drinks without trying, pull you out of a depressive funk by showing up with carne asada fries at midnight. We were inseparable for years. So when she started coming over more after Mark and I moved in together, I thought it was normal. She was lonely. She had gone through a messy situationship. I figured maybe she liked the noise of our apartment better than her own quiet one-bedroom. But little things started happening. She'd linger after I went to bed. Mark would tell me she just needed someone to talk to. She'd show up in outfits that looked more like clubwear than casual hangout clothes. But I ignored every instinct, every buzzing alarm in my chest. Because if I learned anything from my last relationship, it was that jealousy can turn you into someone you don't recognize. So I told myself not to be paranoid, not to overthink signs. I let them both convince me I was sensitive, anxious, reading into things. Looking back, I realize how hard they worked to make me doubt myself. It started small. They'd exchange these weird little glances when I entered a room. Mia began calling Mark dude in this too friendly tone. Once, when she left her tote bag in the living room, a receipt from Starbucks fell out. 2 drinks. One with her name, one with Mark's. When I asked about it, they laughed at me, literally laughed. "You think we're sneaking around for lattes?" Mia said, rolling her eyes so hard she looked dizzy. I let it go. I always let things go. But the first real sign that something had snapped was about a month before I got COVID. Mark had asked me, out of nowhere, if I'd ever considered getting a place of my own for a while. He said it casually, while we were watching Netflix, as if it were normal to ask your long-term partner if they wanted to live separately without any prior conflict. I remember staring at him, waiting for the punchline. There wasn't one. I should have seen everything coming then, but I still trusted him. I still trusted her. And now, sitting outside the building with the desert heat pressing against my feverish skin, I finally understood that all the little things were never little. They were warnings, warnings I refused to hear. And the file I just sent Denise, the one that would blow everything open, was about to be the first domino. Denise still hadn't opened the file, but she kept calling me back to back, her voice cracking every time. I told her I'd explain everything when she had the strength to look at what I'd sent. But right then, sitting on the curb, cracked lips, weak from fever, watching the sun drop behind the parking lot, I finally had time to think about all the moments that led up to the avalanche. The escalation didn't happen overnight. It built slowly, quietly, like mold you don't see until the wall is already destroyed. About 2 months before I got COVID, Mark started getting defensive over nothing. If I asked where he was, he'd say I was interrogating him. If I asked why Mia had been over so often, he'd say I was obsessed. The worst part? He wasn't yelling, he wasn't even angry. He said everything in this calm, patronizing tone that made me feel like I was losing it. I remember one night when I came home from work at the vet clinic in Spring Valley. The lights were off except for this soft lamp in the living room. I walked in and saw 2 wine glasses on the coffee table, one still half full, the lipstick smudge definitely not mine. And Mark sitting on the couch like he'd been caught doing something he didn't even care about hiding. "Mia was here," he said, shrugging. "She had a rough day." He didn't even offer a lie. And when I stood there staring at the glass, the smudge, the atmosphere that felt too intimate, he said, "Don't start." That night I cried in the shower so quietly I gave myself a headache. Then came the money problems. Mark suddenly became weird about our shared expenses. He claimed I wasn't contributing enough, even though I'd been covering groceries, utilities, and most of the pet expenses for our dog. Meanwhile, he was going out more, buying new clothes, getting his car detailed every other week. Every time I brought it up, he'd deflect with something Mia supposedly said about how some girls take advantage of their men. Hearing her name in that context stung more than anything. But the worst day was 1 week before the Vegas trip. Mia came over in this silk tank top I swear she wore only around him, not me. She sat on the arm of the couch, my spot, and started talking about booking a best friend trip. She said it to me, but looked at him. "Wouldn't it be fun if you and I went somewhere for once?" she asked me, but her eyes flicked to Mark like she was asking permission. I said I'd think about it, but Mark chimed in too quickly. "Maybe the 3 of us should all go to Vegas." The way they glanced at each other, tiny, secret, smug, I felt sick to my stomach. I didn't know then that they already had the room booked, under my name. When I tested positive for COVID a few days later, everything snapped into place with brutal clarity. Mark refused to come inside when I told him. He barely looked at me. He dropped the groceries like he was discarding evidence of a crime. Mia honked the horn from the car like she was impatient to pick him up from daycare. And when he said those words, "I didn't sign up to be a nurse," something inside me cracked so hard I swear I felt the break physically. But the escalation didn't end there. While I lay in bed shaking, barely able to breathe, struggling to swallow water because my throat felt like it was closing, their Vegas posts kept coming. And every ding from my credit card app was another blow. They weren't just cheating. They were using me, using my credit, my home, my trust. And the fever made everything feel warped and unreal, like watching my own life from outside my body. But the thing that hurt the most wasn't the betrayal. It was that deep, ugly part of me that still hoped, somehow, that when they came home, they'd feel guilty, ashamed, that we could talk. I was still trying to believe I mattered to them. I didn't know yet just how far they were willing to go to erase me entirely. Denise finally texted me. "I opened it. Call me. Now." My hands were still trembling from fever chills when I hit dial. She answered instantly, breathing hard like she'd been running. For a second she couldn't even speak. Then she whispered, "I didn't know. I swear to God I didn't know." Her voice broke so suddenly it startled me. Because the file I'd sent her, the one that sat in her inbox while I waited outside my own apartment like a stray, wasn't just some angry rant or screenshots of Vegas charges. It was the lease addendum, the one they'd filed behind my back, the one that removed me from the apartment we picked out together and added Mia as the secondary tenant. The one with a forged signature that looked nothing like mine, but clearly came from someone who had tried to practice it. The one dated 5 days before I tested positive for COVID, meaning this wasn't a reaction to me being sick. This was the plan before I even knew I was going to get sick. The COVID timing only made it convenient. Denise was crying so loudly I had to hold the phone away from my ear. "He used your social," she said between gasps. "He used your goddamn social security number. I never raised him to do this. He stole your identity, sweetheart. Identity theft." I'd suspected it in the back of my mind after seeing the charges. But I'd shoved it away because admitting it meant admitting the person I loved was capable of something dark, deliberate, and cold. But hearing it from his mother, the one woman he couldn't lie to, made it real in a way that felt like my body temperature dropped 10 degrees. I pressed my forehead into my knees and just listened to her sob. "He said you agreed to move out," she said, choking on the words. "He told the family you were going to leave because you needed space. He said you weren't paying rent anymore. He said you were unstable." Unstable. That was how they framed me. Not hurt, not sick, not betrayed. Unstable. And then Denise told me the part that nearly made me pass out right there on the curb. She said that 2 weeks earlier, during a family barbecue, Mia showed up with Mark. She introduced herself as his future roommate. Everyone thought it was weird at the time, but Mark brushed it off, saying, "It's temporary. She needs a place till she gets on her feet." "Then why," Denise said, voice sharp with horror, "did he tell me last week that he and Mia had been talking about adopting a dog together once you moved out?" My stomach flipped so hard I had to close my eyes. They planned a life together. In my home, with my things, my dog, my credit, my identity, my space. And they were doing this while still smiling to my face, still sleeping in my bed, still letting me believe everything was fine. My fever was making my vision swim, but I forced myself to breathe slowly, because if I passed out on the pavement, they'd win another inch of my life. "They didn't just replace you," Denise said quietly, almost like she was afraid of the words coming out of her mouth. "They erased you." Hearing that from his own mother made something in my chest harden into a solid, cold knot. Because this wasn't cheating. This wasn't a messy breakup. This was a calculated removal. A slow, careful eviction from my own life. And as Denise kept crying, apologizing, begging me not to disappear on her, I finally understood the first real twist of this nightmare. They didn't leave me when I got sick. They'd been planning to replace me long before. COVID just gave them the perfect cover. And I wasn't even close to knowing the darkest part yet. After I hung up with Denise, I just sat there on the curb, breathing through the ache in my lungs, feeling the last pieces of denial crumble. The fever made everything feel slow and heavy, like I was underwater, but the anger cut through it, sharp, clean, sobering. It was the first moment since getting sick that I felt fully awake. They hadn't just thrown me away. They'd replaced me on paper. In the system, In the lease, in their plans. They stole my home, my credit, my safety, my dignity, and then they had the nerve to paint me as unstable to everyone we knew. It wasn't chaos, it was strategy. And once I finally accepted that, something inside me shifted. I wasn't just the sick girlfriend abandoned on her doorstep anymore. I was someone who had nothing left to lose. I wiped my face, stood up, and leaned against the wall until the dizziness leveled out. Then I opened my phone and started the slow, methodical process of taking my life back. Step 1. Screenshot everything. Every forged document. Every timestamp. Every credit card charge. Every post Mia had made in Vegas. Every text where Mark mocked my symptoms. Every message where he told people I was faking it for attention. Every instance of the identity theft. Everything. I uploaded it all to a cloud folder, labeled it clearly, and shared it with 2 trusted people who owed me favors. Not for sympathy, just insurance. Step 2. Freeze everything. I called my bank and told them my card had been stolen. They shut it down instantly. I could practically picture Mark and Mia at some overpriced brunch ordering mimosas they couldn't pay for. The thought didn't make me feel better, but it steadied me. Step 3. Document the lockout. I took photos of the new lock, the altered camera angle, and the timestamp text showing I still lived there. The officer who'd come earlier had filed a brief incident report, so I asked for the number. He gave it to me reluctantly, but he gave it. Step 4. Call the property manager. The moment I said the word forgery, she got quiet. Real quiet. I told her I had proof my signature had been faked and that I was filing an identity theft report. She asked if I could come in the next morning. I told her I'd be there. Step 5. Call my job. I let them know I'd likely need 2 or 3 days off to recover and to handle a legal situation. My manager, who genuinely liked me, told me not to worry. For the first time since this hell started, I felt someone was on my side. Step 6. Prepare Denise. I told her slowly, gently, what I was about to do. She didn't argue. She didn't defend him. She only said, whatever happens next, he brought it on himself. Her voice was tired, old, like her son had finally broken something in her too. And step 7, the step that made my hands shake, was writing the email to Mark. Not to plead, not to explain, not to ask for anything, just this. I know everything, I have all the documents. Tomorrow, the property manager, the police department, and your HR will have copies. You should probably warn Mia. Actions have consequences. I didn't threaten him, I didn't curse him, I didn't insult him, I just let him feel the silence between each sentence. I hit send. 10 seconds later, I heard movement behind the apartment door, rapid footsteps, voices raised in panic. Then Mia's voice saying, she can't do anything, she's sick, she's weak, she's bluffing. But the tremor in her voice said she didn't believe her own words. Good, let them sweat, because I wasn't bluffing. And I wasn't done, not even close. I barely slept that night. The fever came and went in waves, but the adrenaline kept cutting through it like ice water. I kept hearing Mia's voice through the door, muffled, angry, pacing, followed by Mark snapping at her, then silence, then something slamming. They were unraveling, and they knew it. But even with all that chaos, even with everything I'd already uncovered, nothing prepared me for the twist waiting for me the next morning. I woke up curled on the loveseat in the building lobby, where the security guard had let me stay, after he saw me shaking with chills. I dragged myself to the property manager's office right when they opened at 8 a.m. Her name was Cheryl, mid-50s, the kind of woman who had seen every kind of tenant drama imaginable, but even she raised her eyebrows when I dropped the stack of screenshots, timelines, and the forged signature in front of her. She scanned the papers in silence. Then she sighed. I'm going to be honest with you, she said, tapping the signature line. We suspected something was off. The day Mark brought in the update forms, he kept pushing the leasing assistant to process everything fast. Said you were moving out without a fuss. But this, she held up the signature, this isn't even close. My throat tightened. So can you reverse it? Yes, she said, but that's not the problem anymore. I frowned. What do you mean? She turned her computer screen toward me, and my stomach dropped. There, on the tenant portal, under my name, someone had submitted a 72-hour eviction request against me, as if I was the one illegally occupying the unit, filed 2 days earlier. While I was still in bed with a fever, barely able to breathe, it listed me as a trespass risk. It claimed I had a history of emotional instability. It claimed I'd threatened Mia. All lies, and the signature on that document, also forged, by someone who'd stopped even pretending to imitate my handwriting. My mouth went dry. They tried to evict me from my own home before changing the locks. Cheryl nodded grimly. If this had been processed, security could have legally barred you from the building. They tried to make it so you had no way back in, at all. I felt the room tilt. Not only had they replaced me, not only had they stolen my identity, they'd tried to erase any legal trace of me entirely. If I hadn't come today, if I hadn't caught it in time, they would have succeeded. But Cheryl wasn't done. "There's more," she said. She clicked another tab. I saw another document, another request, submitted by Mark. Dated the same day he left me sick on the doorstep. It was a request to register a second dog on the lease. A dog I didn't own. A dog I'd never heard of. A dog listed under the name Milo. My breath hitched. Milo was the name I had once said, half-jokingly, I'd give a child someday. They weren't adopting a dog. They were replacing my dog, my life, my name, my future, piece by piece. The twisted kind of symbolism you don't notice until it slaps you in the face. I sat there frozen, my fever suddenly feeling like nothing, because this was worse. This was deliberate, calculated erasure. Cheryl put a gentle hand on my arm. "I've already flagged your account. The eviction request is null. The lock change is illegal. And once you file the police report for the forgery, we can formally remove Mark and Mia." I nodded, but I was barely hearing her. Because suddenly everything clicked into place. The sudden defensiveness, the money disappearing, the over-the-top accusations that I was unstable, the push to get me to consider living separately, the weird timing of the Vegas trip, the laughter when I questioned anything, the smudged wine glass, the early paperwork, the dog. This wasn't just betrayal. This was a takeover, a planned ousting, a quiet, administrative ambush. And the worst part wasn't that they tried to replace me. It was why. Because now that the pieces were lining up, I realized something chilling. There was a reason they needed me out before a certain date. A reason they tried to erase me so thoroughly. A reason that went beyond cheating, beyond selfishness, beyond wanting each other. A reason cold enough to make my skin crawl. I didn't know it yet, but I was about to. I left the property manager's office with my head spinning, not from the fever, but from the realization that this whole thing had been engineered like a blueprint. People like Mark don't plan this far ahead unless something pushes them. Something big, something that forces their hand. And I figured it out later that afternoon when Denise called me again. She wasn't crying this time. Her voice was low, shaken, but steady. Like someone who'd finally let herself look at a truth she'd been avoiding for too long. "Are you somewhere private?" she asked. I stepped into the stairwell. "Yeah," she exhaled. "I need to tell you something." I braced myself, because the tone in her voice didn't belong to a mother defending a son. It belonged to a mother confronting the monster she raised. "Mark didn't get that job promotion he told you about," she said. "He was written up, twice." "What, for what?" "For taking out a line of credit in one of his coworkers' names." She paused. "He said it was a misunderstanding. HR didn't believe him. Last week he had a final review. They told him one more financial red flag and they'd report him to the authorities." My stomach clenched. "He needed clean credit," she said. "A clean address. A new account. Something to stabilize his paperwork so he could look responsible if HR checked again." It hit me like a punch. He didn't steal my identity because he wanted my money. He stole it because he needed someone to fall with if he got caught. Someone gullible, someone trusting, someone who wouldn't fight back, someone he could paint as unstable, someone like me. Denise's breath shuddered. "He used you as a shield. He thought if anything blew up, it would land on you first." I gripped the railing, feeling the cold metal through my fever-warm hands. "And the worst part," she whispered, "is that Mia knew." I shut my eyes. "She told him," Denise continued, "that you were soft, that you'd never report anyone, that you'd blame yourself, that you'd let it slide because you didn't like conflict." My throat tightened. "She said that?" "Yes. She told Mark that replacing you was easy, that you wouldn't make noise. And after the lease update, she even told our family," her voice broke, "that you were slipping mentally and probably wouldn't even notice." I felt something sharp twist inside me, humiliation mixed with rage and a grief so deep it made my chest ache. "And there's more," Denise said. "You need to hear it." I steadied myself. Tell me. He wasn't planning on moving in with Mia long-term, she said. That was never the end game. What? He told one of his cousins last week that once the new accounts were finalized, once you were gone and the paperwork was in motion, he was going to push her out too. He said she was a temporary asset. He was going to blame the Vegas charges on her, then he'd move somewhere new, start fresh. I felt cold all over. He said, she whispered, that girls like you and Mia come around all the time. And that some girls are useful only until the paperwork is done. Useful, until the paperwork is done, like we were tools, not human, not hearts, not history, not people, just leverage, disposable leverage. A hot wave of nausea rolled up my chest. I pressed a hand to the wall until it passed. Sweetheart, Denise said quietly, brokenly, my son is not who I thought he was. And he was ready to ruin your entire life, not because he didn't love you, but because you were convenient. Convenient. There it was. The cold, horrifying reason. He erased me because it was practical. He used me because it was easy. And he betrayed me because he believed I wouldn't fight. He believed I'd stay quiet. He believed I'd stay sick and helpless and scared. He believed wrong. By the time Denise finished talking, something inside me had gone still. Not numb. Not broken, just steady. Cold, clear steady. The kind of steady you get when the worst version of the truth finally settles and you realize you survived it. Mark didn't betray me for love. He didn't betray me for Mia. He betrayed me because I was convenient to sacrifice. And that meant my revenge didn't need to be dramatic. It just needed to be thorough. I left the stairwell, walked straight to the Henderson Police Department, and filed the identity theft report. I gave them everything: screenshots, documents, timestamps, forged signatures, lease forms, credit card charges, the whole paper trail he was too sloppy to hide. The officer's eyes widened more and more as I laid it all out. This is serious, he muttered, flipping through the pages. I know, I said. My voice didn't shake, not once. Then I went to the property manager's office. Cheryl had already drafted the reversal files. We sat together while she officially restored my name to the lease and flagged Mark and Mia as unauthorized occupants. She printed out the notices and stamped them with that heavy, satisfying clunk that sounded like justice getting dressed for work. Next stop, HR at Mark's job. Denise had warned me, but seeing their reaction was still priceless. When I emailed them the full packet, with a calm, straightforward explanation, they didn't even wait an hour. They responded, "Thank you for bringing this to our attention. We'll be initiating an internal review immediately." Internal review. For a man who was one red flag away from a criminal referral. Perfect. But the final step, the part that tied everything together, happened back at the apartment building. I walked up the stairs with two uniformed officers behind me. Cheryl had handed me the official authorization to re-enter my home, and the officers were there to enforce it. My body still ached from the fever, but my mind was sharp, focused, cold. We stopped at my door. I knocked once. No answer. Knocked twice. Then Mia's voice shaky. "Who is it?" "Your problem," I said. An officer stepped forward. "Henderson PD, open the door." There was whispering on the other side, a frantic scrape. Then the deadbolt turned. Mark opened the door with the exact expression I'd pictured 1,000 times. Shock mixed with guilt, coated in the fake confidence of a man who thought he was smarter than everyone else. The officer handed him the notice. "You are no longer authorized to occupy this unit. You need to vacate immediately," Mia gasped. "What? That's illegal. She's lying." "No," I said, stepping across the threshold. "You lied." Mark opened his mouth, but I held up my phone. "And by the way," I added, "HR has your file now. They'll be reaching out." His face drained. "Also," I said, "the police have my identity theft report." That one landed hard. He swayed like someone had punched him in the chest. Mia snapped, "This is insane. She's making a scene." "Really?" I said. "Because here's the beautiful part. I don't have to make a scene. The paper trail does it for me." The officers gave them 10 minutes to grab essentials. 10 minutes of whisper arguing and panic blaming that spilled into the hallway. At one point, Mia started crying, saying she didn't sign up for this. I almost laughed at the symmetry. When they finally left, bags half-zipped, dignity in shreds, I stood alone in my apartment, breathing in the stale air of everything they'd tried to steal from me. It was mine again. Every inch, every key, every document. Every piece of my life they tried to erase. I cleaned the place slowly, room by room, still weak but fueled by something stronger than anger. When I finally collapsed onto the couch with the dog curled beside me, I felt something I hadn't felt in weeks. Peace. Denise called that night. She apologized again. She thanked me for not covering for him. She said she loved me like family. I believed her. "I'm proud of you," she whispered. "He thought you'd stay quiet." "Well," I said, staring at the unlocked door, "he should have read the fine print." Because the girl he tried to erase didn't disappear. She signed her name, filed her documents, made her calls, and took her life back line by line. And in the end, the only one erased was him.